The shadows seemed to creep closer as we hiked deeper into the forest, the night air thick with a chill that seeped into my bones. This training exercise was supposed to be routine, just another navigation test to prove our skills. But I couldn't shake the ominous feeling that had settled over me. With each step, the trees appeared to bend inward, bare branches reaching out like skeletal hands to bar our way. Our night vision goggles cast an eerie green glow, yet did little to pierce the darkness that surrounded us. The others marched on steadily, oblivious to the sinking dread that clawed at my insides. But the forest knew. I could feel its watchful presence tracking our every move. A snap of twigs to my left made me whirl around, rifle raised. But there was nothing, only shadows. "Get a grip, rookie," Jackson muttered as he brushed past, his hulking frame momentarily obscuring the path ahead. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. Just my imagination playing tricks on me. We were getting close now, the navigation device indicating that the hidden package was just half a click northeast. Breaking through a dense copse of trees, we found ourselves at the edge of a small clearing. Barely visible against the brush was a metallic box, tucked away just as Command had promised. As we moved in, a mournful wind stirred, carrying with it anguished whispers that raised the hair on my arms. The fallen leaves swirled violently, as if stirred by some unseen force. That's when they appeared. Shuffling from the tree line, ragged silhouettes emerged with stiff, unnatural gaits. Soldiers. But something was wrong. Flesh hung from their emaciated frames. Uniforms were stained with dark splotches that looked unsettlingly like old blood. Their eyes, just barely visible through shredded skin and muscle, were a milky white. Dear God, these weren't soldiers. These were corpses. Gunfire erupted as my teammates unleashed their weapons. The staccato bursts illuminated the undead monstrosities in brief flashes. Riddled with bullets, they staggered back, but impossibly remained standing. Fear threatened to override my training. These things couldn't be real. Zombies only existed in horror films, right? The shuffling corpses advanced relentlessly, mouths opening to emit an awful groaning. The primal part of my brain screamed at me to run, but I forced my shaking hands to lift my rifle. I fired round after round, watching as chunks of decaying flesh exploded from the advancing horde. Still they came, heedless of their wounds. One lurched forward with jaws snapping, chunks of skin peeling away from its face to reveal the bone beneath. I fired point blank into its skull, blasting it apart in a spray of thick, clotted blood. The thing collapsed at my feet, limbs still twitching. Before I could react, another grabbed me from behind, icy fingers digging into my shoulders with an unnatural, vice-like grip. I struggled violently as its mouth descended toward my neck, its fetid breath washing over me. Twisting in its grasp, I smashed the butt of my rifle into its face. The force caved in the dried, leathery skin, exposing the rotten musculature underneath. It stumbled back, disappearing into the mass of bodies. Gasping, I scrambled away and unleashed a barrage of gunfire into the horde. Limbs were blasted off and torsos exploded, but nothing slowed their unrelenting advance. "We can't kill them!" I heard Jackson yell hoarsely. He was right. These things didn't operate by any natural laws. Recoiling in terror as a zombie lunged at me, I reacted on pure instinct and thrust my combat knife into its eye. Foul-smelling liquid spurted out as I drove the blade to the hilt into its putrid skull. It spasmed violently, then went limp. Yanking out the blade, I turned to see brows plummeting toward me, jaw unhinged grotesquely. I slashed wildly, hacking into its neck until the head detached from the body. But still, it snapped at me, rolling sickeningly on the ground as the body staggered onward. Nausea threatened to overwhelm me at the nightmarish sight. These were no ordinary zombies. We were facing an evil that seemed to defy any natural order. My mind reeled, struggling to comprehend the horror unfolding around us. All semblance of tactics forgotten. We now fought like cornered animals, stabbing and shooting in a frenzied desperation. But it was no use. The creatures kept coming, bodies mangled and torn apart yet still somehow animate. Some moved on after losing everything below the ribcage, crawling relentlessly through the leaves, biting at our ankles and legs. As we pushed through the trees, I turned to see one dragging itself toward me, intestines trailing behind it, one baleful white eye glaring from a head split in half. Screaming, I brought my boot down again and again on its skull until it finally went still, the remaining eye dull and vacant. Panting, drenched in sweat, blood, and rotting effluvia, I looked around to see the creatures forming a tightening circle. We were surrounded, boxed in with no way out. These horrors would not stop until they had ripped us all to pieces. As the death circle closed in, I knew we were gazing into the face of true evil. Gunfire rang out, jolting me upright. The creatures fell back, dark oozing holes burst across their forms. Strong hands grabbed my shoulders, pulling me to my feet. Jackson's grizzled face, streaked with dirt and blood, swam before me. "On your feet, soldier!" he bellowed. "We're getting out of this hellhole." We ran on, the two of us, supporting each other as we navigated the maze of trees. The sounds of the dead receded, but we did not stop until the trees thinned and we stumbled onto an old forest road washed in the first faint light of dawn. As we rested, the reality of what we had witnessed slowly started to sink in. The others were all gone. Of that, I was now certain. We had been pawns in some twisted experiment, confronted by an evil that defied all logic and training. Never again would I look at the world the same way. Command could never know what really happened in those cursed woods. They would never believe it. The official story would be a training accident, some equipment malfunction that resulted in casualties. But we would carry the truth forever, a burden only those who survived that horrific night could fully comprehend. As the first rays of the morning sun banished the shadows, I took one last look back at the forest that had almost claimed me. The trees were still once more. The horrors we had faced vanished like ghosts with the breaking dawn. But deep down, I knew they were only lurking, waiting for their next victims. None who ventured into that accursed place would ever emerge unscathed. The things we had witnessed were burned into our memories, never to fade. We had survived the night, but would forever be haunted by the horrors it had wrought. The journey back was long and arduous. Jackson and I supported each other, both physically and mentally, as we slowly made our way through the rugged terrain. The images of the nightmarish creatures plagued my thoughts, their soulless white eyes and grasping hands appearing every time I blinked. I couldn't stop replaying the terror of the chase, the guttural moans as they closed in. It was a small miracle we had made it out at all. As we reached the outskirts of the forest, we came across the remains of our comrades. Torn uniforms and dismembered body parts littered the undergrowth, painting a horrific picture of their final moments. I fell to my knees and retched violently, the gruesome sight burning itself into my memory. Jackson simply stood, staring numbly ahead, his face an unreadable mask. Reaching the extraction point, we were met with disbelief and suspicion. The debriefing was a blur of pointed questions, veiled accusations, and thinly veiled threats if we spoke publicly about what had transpired. The shattered remains of our team were written off as training casualties, with no mention of what had really killed them. It was clear we were expected to toe the official line. The truth would remain buried in those godforsaken woods. For weeks, I suffered relentless nightmares, jolting awake, drenched in cold sweat, visions of pallid dead soldiers still vivid in my mind. Jackson and I barely spoke, each lost in our own private hell, unable to voice the horrors we had witnessed. There were times I wondered if it would have been better to die back there with the others, rather than live with the eternal weight of what I now knew existed out there in the shadows. Our superiors kept a close watch, constantly probing for any cracks in the fabricated account they had created. The veiled threats persisted, and it became clear our military careers would be over if we dared speak out. This had gone far beyond just hiding the truth from the public. Powerful forces were at work to ensure what happened in those woods stayed buried. Weeks turned to months as Jackson and I were slowly transitioned out of active duty. A botched training mission, tragedy at the hands of simple equipment failure and human error. That was the official truth. End of story. We played along during the day, but the real story haunted us at night. Neither of us would ever be the same. Sometimes, I still catch myself scanning the tree lines wherever I go, half expecting to see pale forms shuffling between the trunks. I doubt the visions will ever truly fade. What we endured out there transcended any normal horrors of war and combat. We glimpsed something inexplicable, an evil that defies understanding, and it has left wounds that will never properly heal. We survived, but will carry that cursed night with us forever.